death, 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 and then suddenly we get the brinking dawn with antennae toward worlds that glow and sing. It's Holy Saturday, if you will, okay? It's Good Friday, now it's Holy Saturday. To spoon us out more liquid than the dim locution of the eldest star, that's Lucifer, and pack the conscience naveled in the plunging wind, umbilical to call, and straightway die. What he's afraid of is, listen, is this going to be a stillbirth for me? Am I going somewhere, or is this going to end like a poetic abortion, in a sense? Death. Oh, caught like pennies beneath soot and steam, kiss of our agony thou gatherest. Kiss of our agony thou. Condensed, thou takest all, shrill ganglion passion with some song we failed to keep. I'm trying to sing this song, but I don't know, I'm failing. And yet, like Lazarus, there it is, like Lazarus rising from the dead. And like Lazarus, to feel the slope. Now the train starts to go up again on the other side, okay? To feel the slope, the sod and billow breaking. By the way, I just should tell you that the word sod is not just clothes, it means sodomy. It means, that's the name that they gave to someone who was gay back in the 1920s, a sod. So that's also here. And is he breaking at this point? Lifting ground, a sound of waters bending astride the sky, unceasing with some word, capital W, that will not die. What is that word? Well, the Logos. One thing, right? It's Christ. It's also, if I could only write the perfect poem, it would be the Word in its own way, you see, both of these. Now he's on the other side. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. He looks out, he turns towards the river in a tugboat. Tugboat is going up the East River. A tugboat, wheezing wreaths of steam, lunged past. With one galvanic blare, strove up the river. I counted the echoes assembling, one after one, searching, thumbing the midnight on the piers. Lights, coasting, left the oily tympanum of waters. We are back now into a kind of ordinary time as well, okay? This is New York now, every day, the quotidian. And then he says, and this thy harbor, O my city. New York he loves, you see. I have driven under, tossed from the coil of ticking towers, tomorrow and to be, hereby the river that is east. Here at the water's edge, the hands drop memory. The hands drop memory. You know what he's doing, I think, here? You know, in Dante, at the end of the Purgatorio, you have 2 rivers. You have the Lethe, and then you have the Eunoe. Remember? Okay. Where you forget, but that's what the Lethe River does. You forget your past sins. But the Eunoe, what that does, it allows you to remember the good things that you did in this life, and you carry them with you into a blessed state. Okay, and I think that's something of what's going on here with the East River. Shadowless in that abyss, they yet accounting lie. How far away the star is pooled to see. Now we're looking at the whole sea as from a distance, like eternity, okay, from another eye. Or shall the hands be drawn away to die? Or is the whole thing going to be a fiasco? Is it going to be a failure? He questions, he doesn't know. He's a pilgrim on a search. Kiss our agony, and you think of Christ on the cross, I think, thou gatherest, O hand of fire, gatherest. Okay, enough of that, Boston. What time do we have? Do we have any time left?
Yeah.
A couple minutes?
No, more.
Okay, how many minutes? 4?
Well, no,
3?
more.
Oh, Lord.
You just go.
No,
Just
Mom,
go.
let me...
We had to leave at 8:30.
Okay, huh?
We had to leave at 8:30, so.
Okay, good. So I still have a little time. Got it.
A lot.
Okay, here we go. Now look at William Carlos Williams. He's on the subway too. He's going from New Jersey. He's probably going over to see Louis Zukowski over here in the Bronx. Okay. Anyway, he's 70 years old when he writes this poem. 70. Okay. Hart Crane was like 28 when he wrote his. Okay. And Williams is on a train in 1953 on a subway. It's a different kind of poetry altogether. Notice there's a step-down line, what he called the triadic step-down line. He had already, Williams, by the time he was 70, had suffered several serious strokes, which had debilitated his whole right side. All he could type with was with one finger in his left hand. And that's how he typed, okay? But he kept typing. He was a poet. He kept writing, okay? And then it's that kind of, it's not that tough quatrain, that, nervous tension. This is much mellower lines, you see. So he's on the train and he's writing this poem to his wife, to Flossie. He's been married to her now since 1912. It's 1953. That's what, 41 years already, right? Something like that, right? And he says, I saw another man yesterday in the subway. I was on my way uptown to a meeting. He kept looking at me and I at him. He had a worn knobbed stick between his knees, suitable to keep off dogs. A man of perhaps 40. So he's 70, and he's looking at a man who's 40 years old, okay? He wore a beard, parted in the middle, a black beard, and a hat, a brown felt hat, lighter than his skin. His eyes, which were intelligent, were wide open, but evasive, mild. So he's looking at an African-American man, 40 years old, sitting across from him on the subway, okay? I was frankly curious and looked at him closely. He was slight of build, but robust enough, had on a double-breasted black coat and a vest which showed at the neck the edge of a heavy and very dirty undershirt. His trousers were striped and a lively reddish brown. His shoes, which were good, though somewhat worn, had been recently polished. His brown socks were about his ankles. In his breast pocket he carried a gold fountain pen and a mechanical pencil. For some reason which I could not fathom, I was unable to keep my eyes off him. A worn leather zipper case, bulging with its contents, lay between his ankles on the floor. And then I remembered, when my father, by the way, who's been dead since 1918, okay, so when my father was a young man, it came to me from an old photograph. He wore such a beard. This man reminds me of my father. I am looking into my father's face. Some surface of some advertising sign is acting as a reflector. It is my own. But at once, the car grinds to a halt. Speak to him, I cried. He will know the secret. He was gone, and I did nothing about it. With him went all men and all women too, were in his loins. Fanciful or not, it seemed to me a flower whose savor had been lost. It was a flower, some exotic orchid that Herman Melville had admired in the Hawaiian jungle, or the lilacs of men who left their marks by torchlight, rituals of the hunt on the walls of prehistoric caves in the Pyrenees. Oh, what draftsmen they were, bison and deer. Their women had big buttocks. That's Williams for you. But what draftsmen they were. By my father's beard, what draftsmen. And so by chance, how should it be otherwise? From what came to me in the subway train, I built a picture of all men. It is winter. And it goes on, the poem goes on. Now the next section, he'll look at his wife who's watering the flowers in the winter time. Okay, keeping them alive, keeping them good. Well, what's going on here? What's the secret that this man would know? I puzzled over it for a while, and I think what it is, he's looking, what is this big knob stick between his legs, and then the zippered valise at his feet? What's going on here? Then I realized this is Pan. This is the myth of Pan. This is the male presence. This is the male figure. Sexual. I think what he's trying to do here, whether he does it successfully or not, is he's trying to explain to his wife why he liked women so much. Okay? That's what he's trying to do. Whether he's successful or not is another thing. Okay? But it's his way of educating Flossie. I don't think Flossie bought it. by the way, okay? But this is what I think he's trying to do. In other words, this is all men, he says, and all women. There's something in us that goes back, he says, all the way back. It's in the genes, it's in the DNA. This sexual this erotic impulse. Okay, that's what he's trying to do, is he tries to understand what's going on. And because this is a poem in which he confesses to his wife, you know, for a lifetime of love, but also dalliance as well. Okay, so take it or leave it. Okay, so that's what he's doing here. And notice where he gets the secret. He gets the secret in the subway underground. Okay, in that demonic chamber, where he sees this is where we come from. In this he uses the image of an African American man, okay, whose name he does not know, doesn't matter, who is his father as well. His father as well. Wallace Stevens, a shorter poem. Reality is an activity of the most august imagination, 1954, 1 year before he died. 1 year, it's a very late poem. I love this poem for a lot of reasons. It's taking place, he's going from Cornwall, Connecticut, back to Hartford. He never drove in his whole lifetime. He was always driven by somebody, okay? It's funny, that generation, but some people never learned how to drive. Okay? He was one of them. And he's driving, by the way, there's a pun, august imagination is also August imagination. It's taking place in late summer, August. Last Friday, in the big light of last Friday night, we drove home from Cornwall to Hartford late. It was not a night blown in the glassworks in Vienna or Venice, motionless, gathering time and dust. There was a crush of strength and a grinding going round. Under the front of the westward evening star, the vigor of glory, a glittering in the veins, as things emerged and moved and would dissolve, either in distance, change, or nothingness. The visible transformations of summer night, an Argentine abstraction approaching form and suddenly denying itself away. There was an insolid billowing of the solid. Night's moonlight lake was neither water nor air. What do we do? I mean, I love this guy, but I don't know if I'm looking at puzzle faces or not. But look what he's doing here. It's an ordinary evening. It's August. He's being driven home. At the time he was with his daughter Holly and Holly's boyfriend, and the moon is out. It's a full moon, and he's looking out, and something about the light is transformative. But how do you capture, how do you talk about God, for example? What language do you use to speak about the sublime? What language? And it's right in front of me. I see something, he says. What does he see? He says it wasn't one of those glassworks in Vienna or Venice, not that. He says it wasn't something that gathers dust. This was something dynamic. What one monk once called God, the definition is dynamic stasis. Dynamic stasis, movement and stillness, okay? Or the point at the center, T.S. Eliot's the point at the center of the great wheel, okay? There was a vigor of it, he says. There was a vigor of glory. There was a glittering in the veins. Something's alive. Something's touching me here. As things emerged and moved and were dissolved. Well, look, he's driving along. Maybe they're going 60, 55, 60 miles an hour, right? Moving, and the headlights are coming towards them. But that's like life. It's evanescent. It's there, and then it's not there. Okay, that's the image. It's there, and then it's not there. Either in distance, change, or is it nothingness? Is it distance? And as I approach it, like the mountain in the distance that seems to be sacred, and then as you approach it, it seems to become more quotidian-like, or can, unless you're in the Canadian Rockies. That's different, okay? That's a whole different experiment. The visible transformations of summer night. The visible transformations. This is the language of 20th century and 21st century theology. This is why I love this guy. He really touches on something that almost no other poet I know can do like this. What did Williams call him? We call him that monk that lives up in Hartford. There would be Stevens night after night sitting in his room, writing poems, looking out the window at the stars, looking at the moon. Okay. He would have made a great Trappist, I think, in another time. An Argentine abstraction, a silver abstraction, the moon, the silver quality of it. Approaching form. See, it approaches form without ever reaching form. And then suddenly it denies itself, and then it's gone. Just like God. Okay, stand still, God. I need to get a picture of you right now. It ain't going to happen, folks. It is not going to happen. There's a moment of transcendence, and then it's bigger than you, and it's gone. But he captures something of that. There was an insolid billowing of the solid. Night's moonlight lake was neither water nor air. Well, what was it? What was it? It's an experience, but I can't pin it down. And that's what I think you find in the late poems of Stevens, this sense of reaching out for the transcendent over and over. And right here in Connecticut, okay? So if you want to find it, take the Merritt Parkway and drive down and see it. Okay. All right. Boy, oh boy, what time is it, Pebble?
It's 8. You got half an hour if you want.
I'm gonna,
You have half an hour.
okay,
if you
all right,
want.
yeah. All right, Sharon Olds. I want to read this one. Sharon Olds, New York poet. When we had a reading for the late Philip Levine, the poet, we read down here, and she was at the same table with me, and it was just something about her that just touched me. So I wanted to read one of her poems. She's a New York poet, okay? Summer Solstice, New York City. It was a poem written just a few years ago. And she catches it, I think. By the end of the longest day of the year, he could not stand it. He went up the iron stairs to the roof of the building, and over the soft tarry surface to the edge, put one leg over the complex green tin cornice and said, if they came a step closer, that was it. And then the huge machinery of the earth began to work for his life. The cops came in their suits, blue-gray as the sky on a cloudy evening. And one put on a bulletproof vest, a black shell around his own life of his children's father, in case the man was armed. And one, slung with a rope, like the sign of his bounden duty, came up out of a hole in the top of the neighboring building, like the gold hole they say is in the top of the head, and began to lurk toward the man who wanted to die. The tallest cop approached him directly, softly, slowly, talking to him, talking, while the man's leg hung over the lip of the next world, and the crowd gathered in the street, silent, and the hairy net with its implacable grid was unfolded near the curb and spread out and stretched as the sheet is prepared to receive a bird. Then they all came a little closer, where he squatted next to his death, his shirt glowing its milky glow like something growing in a dish at night in the dark in the lab. And then everything stopped as his body jerked, and he stepped down from the parapet and went toward them, and they closed on him. I thought they were going to beat him up, as a mother whose child has been lost will scream at the child when it's found. They took him by the arms and held him up and leaned him against the wall of the chimney. And the tall cop lit a cigarette in his own mouth and gave it to him. And then they all lit cigarettes. And the red, glowing ends burned like the tiny campfires we lit at night, back at the beginning of the world. Only a woman could have written this. This is so incredible, this poem. So nurturing, so that mother, the mother and the child instinct. And then thinking back when you were a little kid and you went with the campfires. It's so innocent. And they have managed to save a man's life on the streets of New York. I just want, I'm going to kiss the page. Okay, and then finally one by myself, a New York poem that I wrote recently. I grew up on 51st Street on the east side between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. It's all gone now. The tenements were ripped out back in the 50s. The old 3rd Avenue L was up there at the time. The synagogue, though, is still there. It's beautiful. They've redone the front, the edifice. I walk up, I remember I tried to stop one time. If I wanted to speak to a rabbi, and I remember there was a guard inside the door, and he just looked to a tiny little opening. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I'd like to speak to somebody inside if it's possible." You got an appointment?" "No, I just thought, perhaps there was someone here." "Can't do it, buddy." I said, "Well, yeah, I just want you to know, I grew up right down the street here." "Oh, yeah? That must have been a long time ago, huh?" End of the conversation, I moved on. Okay. But they say you can't go home again. I guess it's true. Anyway, this one, Johnny Walker Black, the Scotch. Okay, my brother loves Johnny Walker Black. Okay. And there he is in the fish scale light of morning up on East 65th. It's 1945, and our mother has walked my little brother Walter and me to this decaying brownstone to visit the widow of my father's cousin, Frankie Checo, whose Jeep crashed somewhere in Germany just weeks before. Margie's the name, and she's left now with 2 young sons. Little Frankie, whose father never had a chance to hold him, and who will one day share an attic room with Walter and myself. And then there's Frankie's brother, who has just squeezed out through the kitchen window onto the bleak backyard, stepping on one of the babe chicks he's gone out to feed. And now he's howling with yet another loss. But then, that's neither here nor there now, is it? For even then, you knew such missteps could never be undone. And so, with the one who writes these words, standing there with his brother by some bent garbage can down the darkened street, as he rifles through a box of stale cupcakes the grocer has just tossed into the ash can, as if it were some newfound grail. But when his brother demands some crumbs, he grabs an empty whiskey bottle from the grail and brings it. Hold it 1 second. This is a very undramatic moment. Where the hell is it? Hold on. Jesus. I'm sorry. I can't believe this. Got it. Thank you, folks. That was an intermission. Okay, now we... And brings it hard down across his mouth, and suddenly blood is gushing, and there's a black gap where Walter's front teeth were. And now our mother is on the curb, shrieking for a cab to stop, please stop, and then my brother's gone, leaving a gap as black as hell itself. And here's the thing. You spend a lifetime trying to understand just what it was you did that morning. But all you can piece together is that sullen garbage can, illumined by a flickering tongue of light coming from the grocery window. That and a black bottle that seems to snigger at what you've done. And here's another thing. Walter and I still joke about that whiskey bottle all these decades later. Always, it seems, over a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, his favorite, served straight up in a crystal tumbler. Repentant Cain, offering it as Abel takes it with that cap-toothed grin of his. Both of us laughing at what happened way back then. Ha ha. In a world long since gone. The first shot followed by another. Cain still trying to make amends for what can never be amended. Well, folks, that's the poem. So there you go. There's a sense of New York. We can open this, Paolo. Can we open it? Some questions?
Yeah.
So
Thanks. want to sit, or are you okay there?
I think I should sit down, Tom.
Okay.
Okay, is that all right with you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes for questions, if you have some questions.
Where's the person that I planted to ask the first question? He's not here. He's not getting the $5 either. Oh, there's one right there. Yes, please.
Last year there was a film called Patterson, which
Yes.
I wonder if you have opinions about this. I don't know if you know what it is.
Yeah.
It was filled with Carlos Williams' poetry, and also was about a young poet.
That's right.
As a character,
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think Ron Padgett. It was Ron Padgett's poetry, wasn't it? A New York poet. A poem called Patterson. About a young poet who's a bus driver. It's so wonderful because it really captures just the streets, you know, and the falls, everything about Paterson, New Jersey. There's one little scene I love where a young black mother is walking with two little daughters across the street, and one of them has these big sunglasses. She's got, I think, a pink dress on, and she's looking up at the bus driver. It was just one of those just extraordinary moments. And then you hear the poems, Patterson. What is his name in the film? What's your name? Patterson. Are you joking me? Is his name? Yeah, my name is Patterson, yeah. You know, if you have a whole family that grows up, my mom's family grew up in Patterson and Clifton, New Jersey. So the place, it's why, I think it's one of the major reasons why I spent 10 years writing the life of William Carlos Williams, because I was somehow trying to get back to my mother, you know what I mean, to get back to that world which was gone. So, yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it. Also, I also wanted to learn how to write poetry. That was the second reason. And also, I wanted to write poetry, I think you can hear some of it, quote, in the American grain. In other words, a poetry that would be accessible, hopefully, to people. You know what I mean? That was important in terms of my own poetry. Yeah. So, did I see another hand half raised? Oh, yes, please.
I'm interested in the mechanics of the poem you read. The first two rhymed,
Yes.
and the others didn't. So I was looking at the rhythm, and your poem, some of the lines are 10 syllables, which is, you know, blank verse. Some are not.
Yes, that's right.
So perhaps you could tell me about the mechanics of
Yeah.
the poetry you were.
Yes. So the question is, you know, how do you compose a poem? What are the mechanics behind it? What's an issue of form? You know, of the various manners in which you can speak about form. Notice the first one was a perfect Petrarchan, well, perfect, I don't know what that means, but it was a Petrarchan sonnet. But it also had what Hopkins invented, which is something called sprung rhythm, which was an attempt in the Anglo-Saxon tradition to get back to a voice that would approximate the spoken voice. That was what Hopkins was after, okay? I think all these poets in their own way, you know, John Ashbery, for example, okay, just passed away, and I was asked to write a piece for America Magazine on John Ashbery, and he's done everything. I mean, you name it, you know, sonnets, ghazals, whatever form you can, sestinas, he's done it all, but always in a kind of wacky kind of a way. You know, for example, a sestina about Rutabaga, which is about Popeye, the sailor man, and Wimpy, okay? And it's a perfect sestina. So you see the poet pushing the envelope to do what he can. Now, in the 20th century, we have a break. In the early 20th century, well, actually with Whitman, okay? But what form is Whitman using, and what did Hopkins say? Well, he says Whitman is sort of like the Grand Canyon, okay? In other words, these huge lines that go on and on, sort of like what Blake did, what you find in the King James Version of the Bible, okay? Something of that kind of rhythm, which breaks away from the end rhymes, okay? Others, Claude McKay, for example. Claude McKay is working very much in the traditional British, being raised in Jamaica and then coming to New York, is working very much within the traditional quatrain system, okay? So that, he'll have some changes. For example, instead of a straight iambic pentameter, he'll reverse the first foot and he'll start with a trochee, but these are all acceptable changes, right? Okay. Then you get Williams, who said, I spit on sonnets. Okay, that's the way he